What 7 days without sleep does to your frontal lobe is essentially a slow-motion demolition of the human soul. You might think you'd just be a bit grumpy, clutching a lukewarm coffee with heavy eyelids, perhaps nodding off during a boring meeting. You expect a linear slide into sleepiness, where the only consequence is a desperate need for a nap. You might even think you could handle it. After all, you've pulled all-nighters before, but you're wrong. By the time you reach the 1-week mark, your brain isn't just tired. It has entered a state of biological civil war. The CEO of your brain, the frontal lobe, hasn't just left the office. It's burned the building down for the insurance money. You are no longer you. You are a biological machine running on emergency power, and the batteries are leaking acid into your personality. It is now 24 hours since you last closed your eyes. Curiously, you feel incredible. This is the honeymoon phase. Your body, sensing that you are ignoring its basic biological imperatives, assumes there must be a life-threatening reason for it. Perhaps you're being hunted by a predator, or you're fleeing a natural disaster. In response, your brain floods your system with dopamine and adrenaline. This is the mesolimbic pathway going into overdrive. You feel chatty, creative, and surprisingly alert. This is the same reason some people feel enlightened during a fast. It's a chemical bribe from your ancestors to keep you moving so you don't die. But while you feel like you're on top of the world, your frontal lobe is already starting to drop calls. Imagine your brain is a high-rise office building at night. Usually, the janitors come in at midnight to mop the floors and empty the trash, but you've locked the doors. The trash, in this case, is a metabolic byproduct called adenosine. Normally, your sleep flushes this away, but right now, it's piling up in the hallways. Your reaction time at 24 hours is now the equivalent of someone who is legally drunk. Your judgment is the first thing to go. You might decide that buying a trampoline at 3 a.m. is a great investment. If you've ever wondered why being slap-happy feels so good at first, like this video, because your body is currently using its last reserves of joy to keep you from collapsing into a puddle of exhaustion.
By the end of day 2, the honeymoon is ended in a bitter divorce. The dopamine high is crashed, leaving behind a gray, vibrating landscape of anxiety. To understand what is happening inside your skull right now, I read through over 50 clinical case studies and historical accounts of extreme sleep deprivation, including the harrowing journals of military survival training, so you don't have to. What we see is a phenomenon called input bias. Normally, your frontal lobe acts as a sophisticated filter. It tells you which noises are important and which are just the wind. It tells you that the person walking behind you is just a stranger, not an assassin. But after 48 to 72 hours, that filter is shredded. Everything feels important. Everything feels like a threat. The hum of your refrigerator starts to sound like a low, growling voice. The flickering of a street lamp feels like a physical blow to your retinas. Your brain is now taking micro-sleeps without your permission. For 3 to 10 seconds at a time, your frontal lobe simply shuts off. You are still standing, your eyes are open, but you are effectively unconscious. Imagine driving a car and having the engine cut out every 30 seconds. You are no longer in control of the vehicle. You are just a passenger in a body that is desperately trying to force a reboot.
At 96 hours, you enter the psychotic shift. Your frontal lobe is the part of the brain that handles executive function. It's what makes you human. It manages your emotions, your logic, and your sense of time. Without sleep, the bridge between your frontal lobe and your amygdala, the brain's primitive panic button, is burned. You are now a raw nerve. You might burst into tears because you can't find a pair of socks. You might feel a surge of homicidal rage because a toaster popped. This is when the shadow people arrive. Because your brain can no longer process visual data correctly, it starts to hallucinate. It begins with peripheral drift, seeing movement in the corner of your eye that isn't there. Then it gets worse. You see people standing in the shadows. You see the walls breathing. Your brain is running hot, overclocking its visual processing units to compensate for the fact that it can't tell the difference between a dream and reality. The dream world is leaking into your waking life, and you don't have the logic left to tell them apart.
You are now 120 hours in, and your body is effectively digesting itself. Imagine your brain is a laptop. You've been running the most demanding, high-resolution software possible for 5 days straight. The cooling fans have melted. The motherboard is glowing orange. Your metabolism has shifted into a state called hypercatabolism. Since you aren't sleeping, your body can't repair tissue. Instead, it starts breaking down its own muscle fibers and fat stores at an alarming rate, just to provide the glucose necessary to keep your neurons firing. Your speech is now slurred, a condition called ataxia. You can't remember the beginning of your sentence by the time you reach the end. You are experiencing a temporary, self-induced dementia. Your immune system has also left the chat. Your white blood cell count is plummeting. A minor scratch on your finger might start to look angry and red because your body has no resources left to fight off basic bacteria. All resources have been redirected to the frontal lobe, which is currently screaming in digital agony. Before we see if your mind survives the final, brutal stretch of day 7, hit subscribe to keep your own neural pathways clear and your organs functioning. You have reached the 168-hour mark. You are a walking ghost. The horror of day 7 isn't just that you're tired, it's that your brain has begun a process called autophagy, literally self-eating. In a healthy brain, cells called microglia act as the garbage crew, cleaning up dead cells and debris. But after 7 days of total sleep deprivation, these cells become hyper-aggressive. They stop eating the trash and start eating your healthy, living synapses. Your brain is cannibalizing its own connections in a frantic, confused attempt to find energy. You are no longer capable of recognizing your own face in the mirror. You might experience depersonalization, where you feel like you are floating 5 feet behind your own head, watching a stranger move your limbs. Your body can no longer regulate its own temperature. You're shivering in a warm room. Your blood pressure is spiking to dangerous levels, and your heart is skipping beats. If you were a lab rat in a 1980s sleep study, this is the point where you would simply drop dead from systemic internal failure. For a human, the reality is a complete mental break. Your frontal lobe has effectively shut down to prevent permanent hardware melting. You are functioning on brainstem reflexes alone. You are breathing, your heart is beating, but you are gone.
If you were to fall into a bed right now, you wouldn't just sleep, you would collapse into a recovery coma. Your brain would bypass the light stages of sleep and plunge straight into REM rebound. You would experience vivid, terrifyingly intense dreams as your brain tries to process a week's worth of backlog in a single night. But the damage isn't always gone when you wake up. While the human body is incredibly resilient, studies on long-term sleep deprivation show that epigenetic scars can remain. You might find that your memory is never quite as sharp as it was before. You might find that your ability to handle stress has been permanently lowered. You've pushed the engine past the red line for 7,000 miles without an oil change. The metal is warped. The lesson is simple. The frontal lobe is a luxury. It is the crown jewel of evolution, but it requires a high price in the form of 8 hours of darkness. If you don't pay the tax, the brain will eventually take the building. So, here's a curiosity for you. What's the longest you've ever gone without sleep, and what was the first hallucination that made you realize you had gone too far? Let me know in the comments.